What's up, guys? Michael here to talk about why learning to control your emotions is probably better than using an army of titans to kill a lot of people. Today, we're taking a philosophical look at part 2 of season 4 of Attack on Titan. Now, I already covered the first part of season 4, focusing on the philosophy of antinatalism, so be sure to check that out too. But in this part of season 4, plans have changed. And we're now going from a subtle forced euthanasia plan to a very unsubtle genocide by Titans plan. So are there any philosophical revelations to be gleaned from all of this unhinged rage and violence? Well, per my Wisecrack colleague Lux, the key might be looking at it through the perspective of Stoicism. Stoicism is a philosophical tradition that holds that if you want to live a virtuous life, you should follow logical principles rather than unbridled emotions and feelings. Sort of like how you always feel like you can eat 5 to 6 slices of pizza when logically it's more like 2 or 3 with a side of salad. That is, if you're a quitter. So cover your napes and step away from the walls, because in this edition of A Philosopher Reacts, we're going to dig deep into Attack on Titan Season 4, Part 2 to ask, can Stoicism save us? And spoilers ahead. Okay, guys, before we get into it, and I promise this will just take a second, I wanted to quickly tell you that we've recently updated and upgraded our Patreon page, and I think you should check it out. There's a lot of really fun stuff on there. We're doing some extra podcast content where you can hear from writers and editors and researchers at Wisecrack to hear about the videos we're making. If you like this video, what you'll probably like is a new feature where I am doing monthly philosophy office hours, where I'm going to dive deeper into a lot of the philosophical material that comes up in our videos, talk about the history of philosophy, and most importantly, answer questions from you all, our patrons. So if you haven't checked it out in a while, please do. There will be a link in the description. But now, let's get on with the show and talk about Attack on Titan. Okay, so part 2 of season 4 picks up where part 1 left off, meaning things are not going super well. Eren and Zeke are on the verge of carrying out their euthanasia plan, which we talked about in our last video on Attack on Titan. But then, after double-crossing Zeke, Eren gets the power of the founding Titan and goes all out to destroy everyone on the planet who isn't on Parady's island. While Eren is really going for it now, some of our friends and enemies are working together in a last-ditch effort to stop him from doing a genocide. And in so much as Eren and the Jaegerists and of course the Marleyans are fueled by negative emotions, our gang of potential heroes has a chance only if they stop relying on feelings and instead try to do something positive by working towards some genuinely good principles. And how do they do this? A little bit of good old-fashioned Stoicism. So, what is Stoicism? Usually, if someone is described as stoic, it's like when you're talking about an old man with no feelings who drinks whiskey for breakfast and is inexplicably always chopping wood and putting it into neatly organized piles. And while that dude obviously rips, this is not quite what the original Stoics were talking about. In a general sense, they were descendants in the line of virtue ethics, a school of thought that began with Plato and really found its legs with Aristotle. If you're unfamiliar with the concept, Aristotle said that living a virtuous life was all about orienting your life towards happiness. Now, he used the term telos, which means aim, to describe the way in which virtue gives us an aim for our activity. When he says happiness, he's not referring to a general feeling of contentment or swimming in good vibes and great oldies. Instead, he's talking about eudaimonia, which is a type of happiness that has to do with human flourishing, i.e., living your absolute best life. The Stoics turned this idea of virtue into a full-on philosophy of life, and it wasn't really focused on heady concepts or metaphysical ponderings, but about actual human existence. Who would have thought? A philosophy that's just about living your actual life. Now, for the Stoics, the point of philosophy was basically being good at life. As Pierre Hadot describes it, for the Stoic then, doing philosophy meant practicing how to live. That is, how to live freely and consciously. Consciously, in that we pass beyond the limits of individuality to recognize ourselves as a part of the reason-animated cosmos. Freely, in that we give up desiring that which does not depend on us and is beyond our control, so as to attach ourselves only to what depends on us. Actions which are just in conformity with reason. Okay, enough about long-dead Greek dudes. Let's check out what happens when emotions kind of tear Zeke and Eren apart.
始祖にこう伝えるんだ。すべてのエルディア人を今後永久に子供を作れない体にしろと。地ならしで連合軍を潰すのはその後でいい。すべてのエルディア人を安楽死させる。エレン、こんなふざけた計画、俺は到底受け入れられない。
I didn't see this coming.
俺はここに来るためにあんたに話を合わせていただけだ。
That sucks, you know? You find your long lost brother and think you have someone you can like love and trust. Now, obviously, this right here is not Stoicism, but it's important to help us understand Stoicism the same way that like watching blood on the asphalt in Driver's Ed helps you learn about not speeding up the lover's lane without your seatbelt on, and also why necking can and will get you pregnant. Now, what we just saw is basically the opposite of Stoicism. As Zeke and Aaron, and of course like everyone else on the show, are being driven completely by passion, namely anger and hatred. And for the Stoics, being virtuous wasn't simply about orienting your life around goodness. It was also about control, in particular, controlling your passions and emotions. So if a committed Stoic was driving on the freeway after a horrible day at work and got cut off by someone with a baby on board sticker on their car, they wouldn't be overcome with the passion to flick them off with a burning hatred. Also, babies are bad drivers. This is because Stoicism necessitates controlling passions and emotions so that one acts solely on virtuous principles. And while giving someone the double birds while using your knees to drive the car is fun, it's not virtuous. What we see in both Zeke and Aaron's plans and their outcomes is what happens when one's thoughts and actions are dictated by emotion and passion and not reason and deliberation. So let's check out a really interesting scene where we flash back to one of the many scenarios that seem to be at the heart of Aaron's rage. 憎むべきは島の悪魔どもに他なりません。忌むべきは100年前よりあの島に逃げた悪魔。我々の敵はあの島の悪魔なのです。 Any political leader that does that move, they're never good. Now here we get a flashback sequence that gives us a little bit of insight into Aaron's initial decision to sow the seeds of his genocide plan. And it shows us what happens when emotion takes over. Now, Aaron and the scouts are visiting Marley to try ice cream for the first time and get blitzed at a migrant camp and forge a plan of peace with the subjects of Ymir Protection Group. However, during this meeting of the assembly, the leader of the protection group basically goes full Hitler when he calls for the citizens of Paradise to be exterminated. This political fervor is very unstoic, and that it's both fueled by emotion, namely hatred, isn't oriented around any type of virtue, things like courage, justice, or moderation, and is operating on the assumption that one group of humans is fundamentally inferior to the other. In contrast, Stoics would recognize that nature has not given us that memo. This right here is why logic was crucial to the Stoics. And I'm not talking about the type of formal logic that's the philosophical equivalent of algebra, thank God, but a simple logical deliberation on whether or not a specific position or set of actions is virtuous. Again, following in the Aristotelian tradition, the Stoics consider logical deliberation to be a crucial part of virtue. That's because unbridled emotions can easily sway one to extremes, while logical consideration helps us arrive at more moderate and thus more virtuous positions. And here we see the scouts come into the assembly hoping to arrive at a logical position. But all they observe is genocidal fervor. And it seems like this is a sort of final straw for Aaron, as his response to the Marleyans' hatred is just a much, much, much gnarlier hatred aimed back at them. Now, another important aspect of Stoicism is that even when you're not doing xenophobia for lols, living a good life isn't just about seeking out things that are pleasurable for you. Things like wealth, health, comfort, and is this toilet paper or cake? And in the wake of Aaron's victory, Jean is put in a position to weigh his individual comfort versus virtuous principles. So let's check that out real quick.
なんじゃお前は憲兵になって内地で快適に暮らしたかったんだろ。そうしろよ。お前は英雄の一人なんだから。終わった。終わった。だからもう昔のジャンに戻れよ。いい加減でムカつく生意気な野郎に。
Now here, Jean is tempted by the opportunity to retire and live a good life as a hero of Paradis. Now in one sense, it might seem like pursuing health and wealth aren't bad things. It might even be virtuous, assuming that you're not overtly hurting anyone in the process. But according to the Stoics, something can only truly be virtuous when it's also just, meaning that the ends we pursue don't make life shittier for others or happen at their expense. Now, Jean could just hang out and enjoy the spoils of war, but in doing so, he's basically going to be sleeping in a bed built by genocide, which tend to have really scratchy sheets that are soaked with tears of anguish and despair. Now, we see in the wake of Aaron's plan that Flock and the Jaegerists got drunk with power pretty quickly. But those like Jean who are able to leave are operating more in line with Stoicism, as they're pursuing virtues like justice, courage, and moderation above pursuing power and wealth. Okay, speaking of being virtuous, what would the Stoics think about you feeding someone to your mom to make her live? I don't know. Let's find out, because someone does that. This is very gnarly.
何するつもりだ。何か言えよ、アルビー。さっき喋るなって言っただろ。だから行動で示せよ。
Actions do speak louder. Now, who among us wouldn't be tempted to feed a human child to our mother if it would bring her back to life? But even if we can kind of relate to what Connie is doing here, it's clear that, again, he's in this situation because he's unable to deal with the pain of losing his mother. And this pain has led to a plan that's not super logical and is definitely not moral. But, just when it seems like he's about to drop human food into his mom's tightened mouth hole, he's motivated to do something good when he saves Armin from doing suicide via Titan Mom. This seems to snap Connie out of his plan to sacrifice Falco and helps him realize the virtue of doing what's right, even if it doesn't directly benefit one's passions. Okay, in the next episode, Hanji has a similar moment of seemingly stoic clarity. Let's check that out.
エレンは世界を消そう。虐殺はダメだ。これを肯定する理由があってたまるか。ごめん、大きな音出しちゃった。
No, it's okay. You're allowed to raise your voice when you're saying the genocide is wrong. That's a good life rule. You can always be loud. Okay, so here we see Hanji coming to a sort of crossroads between passion and logic as she realizes that genocide of any sort is categorically wrong. Plus, much of the ideology perpetuated by Marley is equally driven by emotions like hatred and fear, and not by any logical reasons, and surely not for any virtuous reasons. This is the point of the season where we transition from seeing a majority of our characters unable to control their emotions to one where they start to sacrifice their own individual interests for the sake of a greater good. Okay, let's skip ahead just a little bit in the same episode.
見ている気がする。大半は壁の外に人類がいるなんて知らずに死んでいった。だけどこの島だけに自由をもたらせばそれでいい。そんなケチなこと言う仲間はいないだろう。虐殺を止めることができるのは
This is some real spit right now.
今しかない。
Come on, join the team. Join the team, John.
ハンジさん、俺はまだ調査兵団です。
Yeah. Okay, so after Hanji has her own come to stoic Jesus moment, she's working to convince Jean to follow suit. And after just being tempted by Flock with a cushy life in the new Jaegerist Empire, choosing virtue for Jean means sacrificing a probably pleasurable existence for the sake of a difficult and likely deadly journey to do what is right. And here, Jean isn't just choosing to go against his former Jaegerist comrades. He's also choosing to work with a new group to actively fight against Eren. And in the process, he's choosing principles over comfort. Okay, so there's a scene that happens, maybe someone will pop it in here, where after John decided to be a good guy, he almost beats Reiner to death, and it seems like maybe he's not going to go with our gang, but look what happens the next morning.
Get up. 出発の時間だ。
協力してくれるの？
なあ、もちろんだ。
So casual.
ほら、いつまで寝てんだライナー。怪我なんてとっくに治ってんだろうが。
If any of you ever beat me almost to death, the next morning, don't bully me. It's just a lot. But we talked before about Jean presumably being anti-Eren's genocide, which is good and way more virtuous than supporting genocide, but it doesn't mean he's gone full stoic just yet. That's because in the scene right before this, rage motivates him into trying to beat Reiner to death. So, stoicism has a bit of a learning curve, but at least he's on the right path. But also don't beat people up. It's not good. Okay, before we wrap up, I want to look at one more clip. This is from the penultimate episode of the season. It's when things are not really going well for our friends who are trying to stop Eren, but let's watch. That was a rough hang.
たとえ地ならしが今すぐ止まったとしても、レベリオもマーレも壊滅状態は避けられない。それはマガトも分かっていたよ。
She said she's gonna get off the ship. It's like, where are you gonna go?
私たちを先へ進めた。それはレベリオやマーレのためじゃない。名も知らぬ人々を一人でも多く救えと私たちに託すためだ。
That's real. Saving the people whose names he never know.
あんたにエレンを殺せるの。私がエレンを殺そうとするのをあんたは黙って見てられる。戦いたくない。あんたと殺し合いたくない。
Ooh, okay. That's tense. So earlier in the season, we saw that up until this point, Annie had largely been motivated by a hatred towards her adoptive father, which evolved into a love for him and a desire to rescue him from the rumbling. Now here, after realizing her motivating aim of saving her father is no longer possible, she seems like she kind of wants to give up. But she recommits to the cause because it's the right thing to do, even though it's very hard. And there's an underlying melancholy here that's clear the odds are very, very, very much against our gang right here. But this right here brings up another aspect of Stoicism, which is the point of pursuing virtue isn't to simply bring about a desirable result. The point is to act in accordance with universal nature, i.e., a sense of natural justice, which will make you happy even if you don't actually get the thing you were aiming at. In this case, it seems clear that even if our mini resistance is destined to fail, they will still experience a type of happiness in continuing to do what's right. It's not dissimilar from Immanuel Kant's moral philosophy, in which right intention matters as much, if not more, than the right result. As the season ends with Eren's founding Titan and his Titan army stomping out human civilization, it at least seems like the best our gang of resistors can hope for is doing what's virtuous, even if it doesn't work out. And this relates to another part of Stoicism, namely that it's not only about learning how to live, it's about learning how to die as well. Seneca, here plagiarized by Montaigne, said, "He who has learned to die has unlearned how to serve." And as Epictetus said, "Keep death before your eyes every day, and then you will never have any abject thought nor any excessive desire." All of this, according to Hadot, means that we should remain present, as if every moment is paradoxically our first and our last. Okay, so does part 2 of season 4 of Attack on Titan give us a masterclass in how to become Stoics? Not really. But much of the season shows us what can happen when hatred, anger, and fear take priority over logical deliberation and the pursuit of virtue. This helps us understand what the Stoics saw as an undesirable and unvirtuous way to live. And towards the end of the season, we start to see how moving beyond negative passions and emotions to approach things from a more logical perspective leads a group of characters to overcome their hatred for the sake of the common good. And this gets at the coolest thing about Stoicism. It's really a philosophy of life. The Stoics weren't primarily focused on heady like making metaphysical arguments about the nature of being or logically deliberating on the nature of truth. They think philosophically for the sake of living a good life, something that puts them in touch with the spirit of Socrates. It also makes them predecessors of the 19th and 20th century existential philosophers, for whom philosophy is primarily about how we live life and make sense of our existence, and not merely about how we understand things in a detached sense. And if you're interested in learning more about this tradition, I can't recommend Pierre Hadot's Philosophy as a Way of Life highly enough. So access your library card, Titan, and check it out. But what do you guys think? Can Attack on Titan teach us about the virtues of the Stoics? Or are we just watching genocidal maniacs have a field day? Let us know what you think in the comments. And definitely let me know if there are other shows, movies, or games that you think warrant some philosophical attention. Thanks as always to our amazing patrons for all your support. And if you haven't checked out our Patreon page in a while, we have a lot of great new content going up, so give it a peek. Hit that subscribe button like you're stoically blowing up your own boat, and don't forget to ring that bell. As always, thanks for watching. Later. Okay, we'll stop that one right there, but not really good advice for like how to be a good brother, I think, but I'm just waiting for the prompter to get here, so they're gonna put this in the video.